What would you do if the most powerful being in existence looked like a broken, cracked clock and someone threw it in the trash? Because one girl didn't, and that single act of kindness cracked open something the entire world was not ready for. His name, at the moment it matters least, is just a number on a status panel, a cracked wooden shell, a worn clock face, a readout so dim and faded it barely registers on the awakening screen. To anyone watching that day in the Grand Hall, he looked like the worst possible outcome of a summoning ritual. But inside that battered shell, sealed beneath layers of ancient binding, lives something vast enough to swallow time itself. He is the Dusk Sovereign, a being who crossed between worlds carrying the weight of dominion over time and space. And yet here he is, bound as a contracted creature, displayed like a piece of broken furniture in someone else's awakening ceremony. His contractor is Celine Mist, and the moment she pulls up his status panel, her expression says everything. She doesn't even bother hiding her disgust. A cracked clock face, no readable rank, no visible power, nothing that comes close to matching her imperial aptitude. Celine's decision takes less than 3 seconds. She dissolves the contract without ceremony, without hesitation, without a single word of explanation. Just like that, the Dusk Sovereign becomes unbound. And in this world, an unbound creature has exactly 24 hours before it ceases to exist entirely. Not defeated, not sealed, gone, as if it was never there. The hall is full of students, all watching. None of them particularly interested in what happens to the discarded clock. Some smirk, some look away, most simply move on. This is the world's verdict on the Dusk Sovereign, worthless, disposable, not worth a second glance. But then a voice cuts through the silence, soft and unhurried, and it changes everything. Celine, are you really throwing him away? The speaker is Lyra Bell, and every student in that hall knows her name, though not for any reason she would be proud of. She is the campus beauty, yes, but also the girl who has reached her awakening ceremony without unlocking a single ability. In a world built on power and aptitude, Lyra Bell registers as a blank slate, and yet she is the one walking forward right now, eyes fixed on the discarded clock face lying on the floor. Her voice stays even as she speaks again. If you don't want him, can I give it a try? I haven't awakened a single ability. Celine's response is immediate and laced with contempt so sharp it could draw blood. A sharp scoff, a curl of the lip, and then the words every person in that hall will remember for a very long time. Trash with trash, now. That's a perfect match. You want this piece of junk? Fine. Consider it a gift. She says it like she's doing Lyra a favor. Like discarding both of them in the same breath is an act of generosity. Then she turns and walks away. Lyra doesn't flinch. She walks to the center of the hall with steady steps, crouches down, and cradles the battered clock face in both palms. Not roughly, not carelessly, with the kind of careful, deliberate gentleness you reserve for something fragile and precious. And then she speaks directly to it, in a voice quiet enough that only the clock can hear. Don't be sad. She doesn't want you, but I do. Inside the clock face, in the sealed space where the Dusk Sovereign has been waiting out his final hours, a system alert fires. Clear and precise, it signals one thing above all else: the crisis has been lifted. And that notification, though for words from a girl with no abilities and nothing to offer, is all it takes to break the seal. The power of the Dusk Sovereign, compressed and locked away for so long it has become something close to a pressure cooker, erupts. Not gently, not gradually. It detonates straight up through the ceiling of the Grand Hall in a column of dark crimson light. It keeps going, punching through stone and sky alike, until the entire heavens above the academy bleed a deep, burning red. Every person in the hall stumbles back. Lyra flinches from the heat and energy tearing out of the clock face in her hands, and instinctively lets go. But the clock doesn't fall. It hangs in midair, perfectly still, the worn wooden shell cracking apart and reshaping itself from the inside out. And then a voice fills every corner of the hall, every corridor of the building, every inch of sky above it. Vast, commanding, absolute in a way that bypasses the ears entirely and resonates directly in the soul. Rejoice, the sovereign of time is born into this world, the ruler of all time. Nobody moves, nobody speaks. Every creature in that hall, human or otherwise, is being pressed down by an invisible weight they cannot see or name. Terrified howls break out among the contracted creatures first. Then silence clamps down over everyone else. Look, that broken clock, it's taking human form. The voice comes from somewhere in the crowd, barely above a whisper. But the words carry all the way to the back of the hall. At the center of the space where the cracked clock once hovered, a figure takes shape. Dark gold armor, catching the crimson light filtering in from outside, each piece settling into place with the weight of something ancient and undeniable. The Dusk Sovereign stands at the center of the hall and does nothing but stand there. That alone is enough. The pressure radiating off him, without effort, drives every creature in the room into the ground. Heads bowed, unable to lift their eyes. He turns his gaze to the one person still standing upright beside him. Lyra Bell, eyes wide, breathing fast, rooted to the spot, but not running. He speaks to her directly. You have excellent taste. I promise you. Together we will climb to the very peak of this world and become the strongest beings alive. The moment those words finish echoing through the hall, the sky outside answers. A column of golden light descends from the heavens, narrow and precise. Locking onto the Dusk Sovereign alone, it crystallizes around him, and a rank materializes above his frame that makes the air in the room feel suddenly thinner. Triple S, the highest classification in existence. A rank most people will spend their entire lives never seeing in person. The silence that follows is the kind that happens after something irreversible. And then, from somewhere near the exit, a pair of footsteps stop completely. Celine Mist, who had already been walking away, stands frozen with her back to the hall. The realization hits her all at once, and it hits hard. I threw away a being of this magnitude, like discarding trash, with my own hands. The conviction she has built her entire identity around trembles violently, cracking at its foundation. But Celine is not the kind of person who accepts a loss without pushing back. She steadies herself through sheer force of will, turns around, and walks back into the hall. Her eyes find Lyra, and her voice drops into the tone she uses when she expects to be obeyed. Lyra, just the name. One word, delivered like a verdict. Lyra's fists tighten at her sides. Celine continues, her voice measured, her offer carefully structured to sound like reason. She says she simply failed to see through his true nature in time. That is the original summoner. The right to guide his power belongs to her. She offers a grade B contract scroll, 3 months of personal mentorship, and frames it as the greatest opportunity Lyra will ever receive. Don't be ungrateful, she finishes, and the contempt underneath the offer is impossible to miss. Lyra's answer comes without a pause, without a flicker of doubt. I'm sorry, Celine. You are the one who broke the contract. He is my partner now, not a bargaining chip. I won't give him to anyone. The cold behind Celine's eyes sharpens into something dangerous. She never expected the timid girl with no abilities to actually say no. So she shifts her attention to the Dusk Sovereign himself and lays out what she believes to be an irresistible case. Her imperial aptitude, her resources, her knowledge, the certainty that staying with her would take him further than anything Lyra could offer. The Dusk Sovereign listens to all of it, and his dark crimson eyes remain completely, utterly unmoved. A quiet laugh escapes him, low and unhurried, carrying no malice, just an absolute lack of interest. Then he turns away from Celine entirely and extends one hand toward Lyra. Lyra looks at that outstretched hand, and every last trace of anxiety in her chest dissolves in the same instant. She places her hand in his without hesitation. Let's go. Dark crimson energy wraps around both of them, and the world shifts. Celine watches their figures fade, and specifically, she watches the way the Dusk Sovereign looks straight through her, as if she doesn't exist at all. The composed mask she has been forcing herself to wear finally cracks. Without me, you won't get far. The words fall into an empty hall, and no one responds. When the crimson energy clears, Lyra and the Dusk Sovereign are standing in a quiet forest clearing, completely deserted. Lyra's legs carry her to the nearest tree on autopilot, and she leans against it without thinking. Her mind still several seconds behind reality. Then something happens beside her that resets the counter entirely. The dark gold armor dissolves, breaking apart into countless tiny particles of dark light that drift inward toward a single point. When the light fades, the towering figure of the Dusk Sovereign is gone. In his place stands a young man with sharp features and white hair, dressed simply, looking faintly amused by her expression. This is Ethan Vale, and this is what the Sovereign of Time looks like when he isn't flattening an entire hall. With his presence, Lyra's brain short-circuits for the second time in under an hour. Ethan looks at her and can't quite hide the amusement. Back with us, Lyra? His tone is warm, easy, a complete reversal from the voice that had shaken souls minutes ago. Lyra snaps out of it with a start, face going red, suddenly unsure what to do with her hands. Ethan's expression shifts into something more serious. From this moment on, we are partners bound by a soul pact. From here on out, we are one. Lyra feels it, a firm, warm current running deep through her chest, something that settles like an anchor. She nods and means it fully. Yeah, I'm counting on you. Ethan gives her a brief once-over, raises one eyebrow, and his tone shifts again, this time to something diplomatically careful. Little Lyra, I have to say, your cultivation talent is, well, not great. Lyra's face goes a little pink. Yeah, it's not the best. The quiet admission hangs in the air for exactly 1 second before Ethan drops the teasing entirely. His voice fills with something that sounds like certainty, the way stone sounds when you knock on it. But none of that matters anymore. From now on, you don't have to do a thing. Lyra blinks. Don't have to do anything. Then how do I get stronger? He smiles, and the explanation he gives next is the kind that breaks a decade of assumptions in under 30 seconds. Everything that takes time and effort, he handles. Every bit of it flows directly back to her through the soul pact. He watches the blank look on her face and decides to simplify further. Let me put it plainly. Now that you've got me in your corner, Lyra, you're already unbeatable. You just sit back and get stronger. Got it? Just sit back and get stronger? She repeats it like she's testing whether the words make sense out loud. They don't, quite. Her entire framework for how beast tamers grow, shared effort, parallel development, mutual struggle, shatters cleanly at the base. She has somehow ended up being carried by her own contracted creature. Ethan watches her stunned expression and gives a satisfied nod. Phase 1 of reality-shattering orientation complete. But the insecurity Lyra has carried for years doesn't vanish just because someone tells her. She's going to be fine. The combat awakening trial is coming up soon, she says quietly, the redness creeping back toward her eyes. If I stay like this, there's no way I'll make it through. Ethan's response is immediate and decisive. All talk and no action gets us nowhere. Let's go put it to the test, and let you see for yourself exactly what the Dusk Sovereign can do. Before long, the two of them arrive at the dungeon plaza. Portals line the area in rows, each one leading into a simulated combat zone where creatures from other worlds wait to be faced. Ratings run from 1 star up to 10, with danger and reward scaling in lockstep. Lyra has barely finished the explanation when the large display screen at the center of the plaza erupts in golden light. A server-wide announcement scrolls across it, and the plaza erupts in gasps. Celine Mist has just broken the all-time speed record for a dungeon run. The crowd buzzes with admiration, and something in Lyra's chest ignites. She spins toward the portal gates, eyes burning. Which dungeon are we going to? With your power, we should at least start with a 3-star, right? Ethan's gaze drifts across the available portals and settles on one specific gate, the most basic, entry-level, beginner dungeon in the entire plaza. We're going in there, the beginner one. Lyra stares at him. But that place only has level 1 slimes. The experience is basically 0. It's a complete waste of time. Relax. This is exactly the right place to show you what it truly means to have dominion over time. They step through the portal, and Lyra finds herself standing in a small, brightly lit dungeon room surrounded by cheerfully bouncing slimes. She looks at the slimes. She looks at Ethan. Her feelings are a complicated mess. So, what do we do now? Ethan lets his mind shift, just slightly, and an invisible force rolls outward across the entire dungeon floor. Temporal rewrite, rewriting the existence timeline of all creatures within the dungeon. Direction, accelerated to 10,000 years forward. The slimes that had been bouncing so cheerfully a second ago simply stop, and then, in complete silence, they begin to crumble, visibly aging, drying, disintegrating, until nothing remains but drifting dust and the soft chime of kill notifications. Lyra watches this happen with her mouth open, and then feels it. A surge of pure energy pouring into her body through the soul pact. Her level climbs, one notch, then another. That's a level up already? She looks around the now empty dungeon. Where did the monsters go? Before time, all things are equal. They've simply been sent to the future. Ethan's mind shifts again. This time, he locks onto the dungeon's own respawn mechanism and accelerates it by 1,000 times. The empty floor erupts with new slimes, a full wave of them, only to crumble back into dust within the same breath. Then again, then again, then again. The experience notifications stop being individual chimes and become a continuous flood, scrolling faster than the eye can follow. Lyra's level shoots upward in real time, climbing past 5, past 10, punching through 15, and settling at 20 before the dust even clears. She stands completely still, processing. A team with solid talent would grind for days in a 3- or 4-star dungeon to reach something close to this. Excitement overrides the shock, and Lyra yanks up her status panel. Contractor, Lyra Bell, level 20, unlock skills, spirit barrier, basic healing arts. She turns to Ethan with wide eyes and pulls up his panel next. Ethan Vale, level 20, unlock skill, boundless liberation, finisher, 20 nights. Temporal shatter. Our experience is shared. When I level up, you level up with me automatically. Lyra's mouth falls open and stays open, as Ethan explains the mechanics with the patience of someone describing something extremely obvious. He accelerated their lifespan to the equivalent of 10,000 years, extracted in advance a portion of the experience they would have accumulated over those 10,000 years, then accelerated the dungeon's respawn cycle so new targets appeared instantly, rewriting the existence timeline of living creatures, extracting 10,000-year experience in advance, accelerating the respawn cycle. That's insane. Lyra shakes her head with something between disbelief and pure joy. You really are the sovereign of time. Let's keep going. We can grind all the way up right here. Good thinking, but efficiency is already dropping. The higher the level, the more experience it takes. These 10,000-year slimes just aren't cutting it anymore. He's already moving toward the exit. We're going straight to a 5-star dungeon, but Lyra stops cold before she reaches the door, and the expression on her face shifts to something sheepish. What's wrong? She points awkwardly to the wall beside the exit. The beginner dungeon has a rule. You have to stay for at least 10 minutes after entering. It's only been 3. Ethan stares at her. A full beat of silence. Then his mind moves. Temporal rewrite. Accelerate. The world warps ever so slightly around them, a barely perceptible shimmer at the edges of reality. 2 seconds later, Ethan snaps his fingers. Done. Time's up. Lyra tries the exit again. The teleportation light activates smoothly, and they step out into the plaza. She glances at Ethan standing beside her, perfectly at ease, and only one thought crosses her mind. Which one of us is actually the contracted creature here? As a beast tamer, she is starting to feel like she's just along for the ride. Though honestly, being carried like this doesn't feel bad at all. They head to the dungeon registration office, and the staff member on duty spots them immediately. Back already? Hand me your ID cards. I need to log your levels and performance rating. Ethan doesn't slow down. No rush on the log. We'd like to enter another dungeon first. Which one did you have in mind? A 5-star. The staff member nearly jumps out of his seat. The lecture that follows is long, detailed, and delivered with the energy of someone who has watched people die because they didn't listen. 5-star dungeons are nothing like the beginner zone. Death inside a 5-star is permanent. You don't come back. Ethan lets him finish. Thank you for the warning, but my mind is made up. Please process the paperwork for us. The staff member stares at him, recognizes that this conversation is over, and reaches for the death waiver form. Lyra signs it without reading it. The teleportation sequence activates, and they are pulled through to the 5-star dungeon known as the Bone Waste. The moment they arrive, a distant shriek tears through the air, then another, then the sound of heavy, rhythmic impacts getting closer very fast. A pack of level 25 bone hounds materializes out of the shadows, locking onto them with savage, hollow-eyed focus. Lyra cries out and moves to activate her spirit barrier, but Ethan is already ahead of her. He raises one hand with casual ease and flicks his wrist. The bone hounds freeze mid-charge, every single one of them, as if someone hit pause on reality. A heartbeat later, their solid bones turn ashen, brittle. Then they collapse in a heap of actual dry bones, crumbling before they even hit the ground. Kill confirmed. Level 25 bone hound. 250 experience points gained. A 5-level gap, and still a one-shot. Lyra checks Ethan's stats and sees that every single one is several times higher than any ordinary contracted creature at the same level. Ethan is already frowning. Still too slow. These small fry are barely worth the effort. Let's go straight for the dungeon boss. Back at the dungeon monitoring room, the staff member who processed their registration is now staring hard at the real-time map. On the display screen, The marker labeled G0 has just updated to level 25, and every monster marker surrounding it vanishes the instant it makes contact, one after another, without a single exception. The dot is moving toward the boss zone at a speed that shouldn't be possible for anyone at that level. Someone powerful has taken notice. Inside the dungeon, Lyra and Ethan press deeper, and the monsters grow stronger with every zone they clear. A bone warrior meets temporal acceleration. 500 years stripped from its existence in under a second, and it disintegrates mid-swing. A wraith is reversed back to its embryonic state by temporal rewind, dissolving before it can even take shape. An entire swarm of flying gargoyles freezes solid in midair under localized temporal stasis, and Lyra uses them as target practice, shattering them one by one. She is not just a passenger in this fight anymore. Her level pushes past 25 with ease, and she is starting to feel the difference in her body. Then she frowns, catching something faint and elusive through the soul pact. I think someone is following us. Ethan doesn't even turn his head. Would killing them give us any experience? Lyra nearly chokes. Attacking other players inside a dungeon is a serious crime. You'd be hunted down and punished by the authorities. Fine. Forget it then. The boss comes first. Let's move before someone else gets there. His mind shifts, and invisible temporal energy wraps around both of them simultaneously. Their figures blur, then vanish entirely, crossing the remaining distance in what feels like no time at all. And then the final zone opens up before them. The space is enormous, and at its center sits a bone throne radiating pressure so thick you can feel it pressing against your skin. Upon it, barely visible, a massive silhouette flickers in and out of view. The dungeon's lord, a level 50, greater bloodline boss, the Bone Sovereign. But they are not the first ones here. Several teams have already gathered around the throne, every member registering at level 30 or higher. The leading team is entirely composed of level 35 and above, led by Rex Valor, one of Radiant Academy's top third-year students. His own aura clocks in at level 38, the single strongest presence on the field. And off to one side, the group that had been trailing Lyra and Ethan through the dungeon finally steps into view. Lance Croft, their leader, takes one look at the competition gathered around the throne, and his expression sours completely. First kill is off the table with Rex Valor's team here, but then his eyes drift to Lyra standing not far away, and greed surges through him instantly. If the boss is out of reach, then the girl with no abilities and her contracted creature will do just fine instead. Meanwhile, back at the Dungeon Plaza's central hall, Celine Mist steps out of a 3-star dungeon portal and walks toward the leaderboard. The display refreshes. Everyone expects to see her name at the top, but when the second-place name lights up, the entire hall goes dead still. Then it erupts into chaos. Celine stands as if struck by lightning, the memory of her own mockery coming back to her all at once. Two important figures who have been monitoring the situation arrive at the plaza, just in time to hear the commotion. They came specifically to see Lyra, but the staff informs them that she and her contracted creature are already inside a 5-star dungeon. No one can enter until the boss is defeated or the dungeon resets. The expressions on both their faces grow heavy. If something goes wrong in there, it would be a very serious problem. Back inside the 5-star dungeon, the noisy gathering of teams falls into a deathly silence the moment the Bone Sovereign stirs awake. Every team surges forward almost simultaneously, a storm of multicolored abilities detonating across the boss's massive frame from every angle. The Bone Sovereign lets out a single low rumbling growl, and a layer of undead shielding rises slowly around him. The vast majority of attacks deflect off it without leaving a mark. Only Rex Valor's heavy greatsword strike actually lands, and even that barely registers. His defense is too high. Everyone, focus your attacks on one point. And then the Bone Sovereign does something that no one in the dungeon briefings mentioned was possible. A roar tears out from within his skull, carrying a draconic pressure so concentrated it sweeps across the entire plane like a physical wave. Then his body detonates inward and outward simultaneously and in seconds. Where the Bone Sovereign stood, a colossal dragon now fills the space. Warning, the Bone Sovereign has activated an ancient dragon bloodline. Level raised to 55. All stats dramatically increased. Dungeon difficulty rating elevated to 6-star. One of the students at the front takes one look at what just happened, and the blood drains from his face entirely. How does a 5-star dungeon mutate like this? Run? Panic spreads like fire through dry grass. The mutated Bone Sovereign locks onto Rex Vale's team, the ones who had been hitting him hardest, and raises one enormous bone claw. Rex channels everything he has into his great sword, holds it in front of him, and roars for full defense. His teammates deploy every barrier and shield they possess. The claw tears through all of it like popping bubbles. The great sword shrieks under the force. Rex spits a mouthful of blood, and his body is hurled backward and into the ground far away. His teammates behind him don't even get the chance to scream. They are reduced to crimson mist beneath that single devastating strike. The smell of blood fills the air. Screams erupt from every direction. And Lance Croft, watching all of this from a safe distance, shows not one trace of fear. Instead, something twisted and delighted spreads across his face as his eyes cut through the chaos and lock onto Lyra, who has gone just as pale as everyone else. Once things get a little messier out there, they make their move. But Lyra is not watching Lance. She is watching the dragon that just erased an entire team from existence, and her legs are barely holding her upright. She turns to Ethan, voice trembling. "Ethan, please, we need to leave. This is way beyond anything we can handle. He will kill us." The mutated boss's power has multiplied several times over since the transformation. There is no logical world in which their current level can stand against something like that. But Ethan, standing right beside her, looks at the terrifying dragon with an expression she has never seen from him before. Not fear, not caution, something that looks dangerously close to excitement. A dragon bloodline. Now, that's interesting. He doesn't look away from the dragon. Kill it, and the experience is going to go through the roof. Every alarm in Lyra's head fires at once. "What are you thinking?" A reckless grin pulls at the corner of his mouth. "I'm going to go play with the dragon." And that was the moment the entire battlefield changed direction. A colossal dark crimson energy erupts from Ethan's body, drawn from something so deep it feels like it's coming from the origin of time and space itself. The deep, resonant toll of an ancient clock rings out across the entire field, and every person present feels it in their chest before they hear it with their ears. A dark gold drive unit appears in Ethan's hand as if drawn from the air itself. He snaps it precisely into place at his waist, and the sound of it locking and carries across the entire silent plain. The Dusk Sovereign raises his right hand slowly, and a dark gold clock face materializes in his palm. He presses the button. The clock resonates, and a dark crimson energy storm detonates outward from the Dusk Sovereign, surging skyward in a pillar that blocks out the view above them. Countless phantom clocks materialize in the storm, vast and spectral, filling the air with a sound that is less a noise and more a sensation. Then the spectral forms of 20 knights flash through the storm, dissolving into streams of light that merge into the armor, one by one, layer upon layer of power and authority stacking, each addition sending a new shock wave across the field. And then the temporal pressure that towers above all things surges outward, and collides head-on with the dragon's blazing gold aura domain. The collision shakes the ground. In the next instant, the Dusk Sovereign teleports directly in front of the Bone Sovereign. Everyone watching is certain they are about to witness an execution. Lance Croft lets out a snort from his safe distance. "Reckless fool. Once that thing swats him dead, it saves me the trouble." But then Lyra feels something through the soul pact. A resolve so steady and unshakable, it transfers directly into her own chest. Her fists clench tight. If this is the path he's chosen, she is not watching from behind. She launches herself forward like a bolt of light, charging straight toward Ethan. The stun gasps that follow are audible even over the dragon's roar. They actually charged in. The Bone Sovereign's massive claw comes crashing down with enough force to flatten the ground, aimed directly at the Dusk Sovereign's position. Ethan doesn't dodge, doesn't step aside, doesn't even shift his stance. He raises one armored arm with perfect calm. Temporal stasis. An invisible force of time and space detonates outward in all directions, and the enormous claw, moving with enough momentum to crush mountains, slows, then slows further, then stops, completely frozen in midair, above both their heads, suspended between one moment and the next. No way. He just stopped the boss's attack cold. Every pair of eyes on the field goes wide. Through the soul pact, Ethan's voice reaches Lyra directly. She doesn't need to be told what to do. She already knows. She raises both hands and pours out every drop of spirit power she has, without holding anything back. The spirit barrier that normally carries a 10-second cooldown snaps back to ready in an instant. Under Ethan's temporal acceleration, she stacks barrier after barrier, layer after layer, over both herself and the Dusk Sovereign, moving at a pace that borders on frenzied. The Bone Sovereign's fury at these two insects who dare defy him breaks through even the stasis. His other claw tears through the air in a sweeping strike, while his massive jaws begin gathering a force capable of destroying everything in front of him. Ethan flickers under temporal acceleration, sidestepping the lethal swipe with a movement so fluid it looks almost lazy. For what is building in those jaws? He simply raises one finger and points it at the gathering energy. Temporal backflow. The entire charge up reverses direction, and for one staggering moment, the terrifying dragon breath falters, its power pulling back into the source that generated it. Every trace of mockery vanishes from Lance Croft's face. What replaces it is something he hasn't felt in a very long time. Fear, under the frozen, breathless stares of everyone present. The space surrounding the Dusk Sovereign slowly bleeds into deep crimson. Countless phantom clocks materialize at his back, their resonance filling the air with a sound that makes the heart feel like it's vibrating. Even the raging Bone Sovereign seems to instinctively sense something it cannot name, something that makes it hesitate. The Dusk Sovereign raises his right arm slowly, and then slams it hard against the drive unit at his waist. The sound of that final judgment rings out, and the Dusk Sovereign leaps high into the sky. The clouds above the dungeon part slowly, as if making room. A colossal phantom gear manifests across the heavens, so vast it covers the entire visible sky above the plane. Everyone scrambles backward desperately, trying to clear the blast radius before what comes next arrives. Lyra tilts her head back, eyes filled with something that has moved past awe into a territory she doesn't have a word for yet. She pulls up Ethan's status panel and sees that every single stat has multiplied by 10 during his ultimate release. The Bone Sovereign senses that this is truly the end and responds the only way it knows how. Every draconic scale lights up at once. Its core ignites. A devastating death breath surges toward Ethan with everything the creature has left. And then something jaw-dropping happens. The death breath, as it closes in on Ethan, visibly slows, reverses direction, and retracts fully back into the Bone Sovereign's own mouth. Under countless horrified stares, the dragon swallows its own finishing move. The Dusk Sovereign lifts his right leg slowly, dark crimson energy gathering around it and forming a massive spiraling vortex. Within the vortex's core, the spectral forms of 20 knights take shape, and in an instant, all 20 merge completely with the Dusk Sovereign. A force carrying the weight of absolute finality launches toward the Bone Sovereign. A dark crimson arc cuts across the sky, piercing straight through the dragon's body with perfect, surgical precision. Under the consuming force of the ultimate release, the Bone Sovereign's entire form dissolves into countless particles and fades quietly into the air. The colossal phantom gear in the sky dims and disappears. The entire plane falls into a silence so complete it feels like sound itself has been switched off. And then Ethan applies temporal acceleration to the remaining monster existence timelines. Throughout the dungeon, the level-up chimes begin, one after another, a relentless barrage that doesn't stop until the level settles at 40, where the Bone Sovereign once sat on his throne. Ancient items materialize slowly from the settling dust. The 10,000-year Dragon Lord's core, the Chrono Dragon Mirror, the weathered Dragon Bone Greaves, and a stream of pure ancient dark gold dragon essence drifts on its own accord, directly into Ethan's body, absorbing 10,000-year dragon bloodline essence. Dusk Sovereign bloodline fusion in progress. Temporal law completeness raised to 18%. New ability unlocked. Chrono Dragon's Breath. All stats permanently increased by 30%. Ethan looks at the readout and allows himself a single quiet comment. Not bad at all, worthy of a 5-star dungeon boss. And that's when the greed around him starts to show its teeth. Every eye in the field is burning with hunger, fixed on the treasures lying on the ground. Flames of desire flicker in dozens of gazes. Then every one of those flames goes out the moment those same eyes drift to Ethan standing nearby. Every one of them, except Lance Croft. He strides forward with full confidence, as if the last 5 minutes of pure terror never happened. Lyra, you can't count this as a solo kill. My squad fought this thing hard before you ever showed up. We paid a real price for it. His voice is measured, reasonable, carefully calibrated to sound like fairness. So these spoils should rightfully be divided between both parties. We'll only take what's ours. That's only fair, isn't it? He is using Lyra's known conflict-avoiding nature as a weapon, trapping her with the language of reasonableness. But before Lyra can form a single word, a cold voice cuts through the air like a blade. Did I say you could touch anything? One sentence, laced with killing intent so concentrated it sends a chill straight down the spine of every member of Lance's squad. But the treasure is right there, close enough to touch, and greed overrides the survival instinct. Don't try to intimidate us. We bled for this. Taking our share is only right. You wouldn't really make a move out in the open like this, would you? Lance points to his fastest man. Sev, go grab that crystal. Sev hesitates for one visible moment, then greed wins. He blurs into motion, launching himself straight toward the gleaming chrono dragon mirror. The Dusk Sovereign raises his right hand, fingers closing into a tight fist aimed in the direction of Sev's charge. A dull, heavy sound ripples outward. The level 35 assassin freezes mid-lunge, every muscle in his body seizes, held by something invisible and absolute. And then he shatters, dissolves completely, as if he was never there. Another one-shot kill. The silence that follows that moment is not the silence of shock. It is the silence of people reconsidering every decision they have ever made. Yet Lance Croft does not reconsider. Instead, something unhinged spreads across his face, and he jabs a finger toward the Dusk Sovereign and Lyra. Everyone saw that. He just killed someone inside a dungeon, a fellow student from the same academy. The evidence is right there. Lyra, you two are finished. He wheels around, scanning for supporters, fishing for anyone whose fear he can weaponize. The ice-cold words cut his performance dead. Enough noise. The Dusk Sovereign's dark crimson eyes sweep over Lance's squad without expression. Temporal decay. The faces of every member of Lance's squad freeze in place, and then their skin begins to dry and shrivel and crack apart visibly, at a rate that leaves no room for the mind to look away. In less than a single breath, 3 withered husks stand where living people had been. A gentle breeze passes through the plain. The husks crumble into pale gray ash and drift away. A stunned murmur rises from the surrounding students. His contractor is definitely in trouble now. Lyra feels all those complicated stares pressing in, and her face goes pale. Ethan steps forward. Don't panic, and don't take responsibility for any of this. The value and potential we've just shown will make the authorities very interested in us. He holds her gaze steadily. Remember, when you are strong enough, you don't follow the rules. You are the rules. Those words break through every trace of fear and anxiety inside Lyra in a single clean sweep. She pulls up her own status panel, and the moment she sees her level and newly unlocked skills, confidence floods back into her like water returning to an empty glass. You're right, but the moment does not last long. Several sharp sonic booms tear through the air above the plane, and an aura of rigid authority and lethal intent blankets the entire space. A 4-man enforcement squad materializes at the center of the field, every one of them registering above level 45. The enforcement captain, Garrett Hale, fixes his piercing gaze on the 2 most conspicuous figures present. Whoever made the kills just now, step forward at once. One of his team members leans in with a hushed report. Captain, Rex Vale's life monitoring signal has gone completely dark. Garrett Hale's eyes flash with a brief, genuine grief before hardening back into something operational. Rex Vale was one of Radiant Academy's most carefully nurtured talents. Someone must answer. He turns his stare onto Ethan and Lyra, and his next words carry the weight of someone who has already decided what conclusion he is reaching. As for Lance Croft's squad, even if they were in the wrong, it was not your place to execute them. Hand over everything you obtained from the boss right now, and come with me to the tribunal hall. The greed underneath the authority in his voice is not subtle. One of the surrounding students can't hold it in. Captain Hale, I can testify, Rex Vale was killed by the mutated Bone Sovereign. These 2 had nothing to do with it. Garrett Hale doesn't even look at the student. He cuts them off completely and repeats his order to surrender the items and come quietly. Then his aura erupts. Level 58. His 3 teammates release their powers simultaneously, forming a combat formation pressure that bears down on Ethan and Lyra with overwhelming force. Ethan doesn't move a muscle. Garrett Hale's eyes flash with cold hostility. Stubborn to the end. Take him down. He leads the charge himself, his entire body becoming a streak of light, a crimson flame sphere forming in his hand, driving straight toward Ethan's chest. Watch out, Lyra cries, moving instinctively to deploy a shield. But Ethan simply raises his right hand with perfect calm and snaps it against the drive unit at his waist. Temporal shatter. The resonant sound spreads across the battlefield, and the flow of time across the entire plane shifts violently. Garrett Hale's lightning-fast figure suddenly appears to everyone watching, as if moving through thick, resistant water. His teammates, mid-formation behind him, move even slower than that. What is happening? Garrett realizes with horror that his mind is running perfectly fine. His body simply cannot keep up. The Dusk Sovereign walks calmly forward to meet him, dark crimson eyes watching the horror twisting across Garrett's expression. Without a trace of emotion, Sovereign's domain. 20 spectral knights materialize at the Dusk Sovereign's back, radiating a pressure that presses down on the entire plane. Then the Dusk Sovereign waves his hand casually, and the first knight's phantom bursts forward, driving a fist straight into Garrett Hale's chest. A sickening thud fills the air. Garrett spits a mouthful of blood, and the motion of being thrown backward plays out in agonizing, helpless slow motion. The second knight follows, then the third. All 20 take their turn, and Garrett can do nothing but watch, completely unable to block a single blow. His eyes burn with defiance even as his body takes each strike in sequence. The Dusk Sovereign remains utterly unmoved until the final knight steps forward and delivers the finishing strike. The detonation that follows brings everything to a close. When the Sovereign's domain lifts, what remains of Garrett Hale dissolves into a crimson mist that fills the air briefly, before fading into nothing. The entire plane falls dead silent, and into that stunned, breathless silence, several overwhelming auras descend from above, without warning. The Lord of Azure Haven himself, Zephyr Thane, arrives with his personal guard at the front. His gaze lingers on Ethan for a brief moment, brow furrowing slightly. Then he takes in the carnage around the plane, and the terror-stricken remnants of the enforcement squad nearby. He gives a slight nod, his voice steady. It seems quite a lot has happened here. That measured understatement carries within it an unmistakable recognition of what the Dusk Sovereign's presence in this dungeon actually means. Zephyr Thane turns an ice-cold gaze onto the enforcement squad. He states his intentions clearly and without warmth. The matter of Rex Valor will be investigated personally. If he died at the hands of a dungeon creature, Radiant Academy will receive a full account. But if anyone intends to use this as a pretext to move against those under my protection here in my city, then don't expect me to show any courtesy. The enforcement squad members exchange one look and vanish in a flash of white light. When the nuisance is gone, Ethan lets his presence settle back into his human form. He retrieves the 2 rewards, equips the weathered dragon bone greaves, and draws out the chrono dragon crystal. He channels his power and absorbs it immediately, feeling something fundamental within his life essence undergoing a quiet transformation. When the absorption completes, every one of his stats surges dramatically upward again. Zephyr Thane steps forward then, his expression respectful, and extends an invitation to meet with Elder Voss at the City Lord's mansion. They accept without hesitation. What happens next no one in that dungeon would have predicted. Guided by Zephyr Thane, they arrive at a simple room that feels older than the building around it. An elderly man stands with his back to them, gazing out the window. At the sound of footsteps, he turns slowly, revealing a face weathered by more hardship than most people will ever encounter in a lifetime. This is Cain Voss, the legendary figure known across the continent as the God of War. The conversation that follows stretches for 2.5 hours. What Cain Voss wants is direct. He wishes to invite them to take part in the Fate War. 6 months from now. The slots are not simply given, they must be earned. What he can offer is resources and a platform sufficient to put those slots within their reach. Ethan takes it all in and then gives an answer no one in the room expects. We'll need to think about it. Zephyr Thane can't hold back. Think about it. This is the highest honor one can serve for the nation, and the resources Elder Voss is offering are. Cain Voss raises one hand and the protest stops immediately. His deep, measured gaze settles on Ethan, carrying no pressure, no displeasure, only understanding and patience. It's fine. When it comes to choices that shape one's future, caution is only right. These things cannot be forced. I'll give you time to think. The breadth of this man's character is genuinely something else. He does not press further. One more thing, he adds, before they can move to leave. After the Awakening trial, a large-scale joint dungeon called the Absol Corridor will open. A proving ground designed specifically for the most gifted talents below level 100, with opportunities inside that cannot be found anywhere else. The Eastern War Division holds only to direct entry slots, and Cain Voss is offering one of them to Ethan personally, regardless of whether they ultimately choose to fight for the nation. Consider it a small investment in the seeds of this nation's future. Lyra looks over at Ethan with bright, excited eyes. Ethan's step falters for just a moment. A pause, brief and deliberate. Then to words, spoken simply. Thank you. and he walks out without a backward glance. Watching them leave, Zephyr Thane turns to King Voss with barely concealed frustration. Elder Voss, why do you indulge him like this? The Fate War is a matter of national importance, and he just says he needs to think about it. He's just... King Voss raises a hand, and the protest stops again. I'll be staying in the city for the time being. I want everything for the Absol corridor prepared. Zephyr Thane straightens immediately. Understood, Elder Voss. The meaning beneath that order is clear without being stated. King Voss intends to oversee things personally, guarding the path for those two young people, and at the same time, watching, waiting, because the weight behind the Dusk Sovereign's hesitation is far greater than any of them have yet imagined. Out in the corridor, Lyra hurries to catch up with Ethan, her voice dropping into something that sounds slightly grumbling. Why didn't we just say yes? The Fate War is dangerous, sure, but it's for the country. Ethan doesn't slow down. He's placing the weight of a nation's crisis and expectations on our shoulders. Yet, he can't even offer us a defiant standing in return. That isn't an equal partnership. He continues without pause. The value we've shown is worth far more sincerity and patience from him. He turns his head slightly, and his voice drops into something quieter and absolute. Remember, until we have absolute power, every promise is just empty words. Lyra says nothing to that, because she cannot find a way to argue with it. They walk in silence until they reach the entrance of the dungeon plaza and step out into the open air. And the moment they do, a figure blocks their path. Dorian Cross, the one who had tried to recruit Lyra earlier and backed down the instant Ethan looked his way. He stands in front of them now with a stiff smile and a tone that has too much flattery in it to be trusted. Dusk Sovereign, please, a moment of your time. I'm Dorian Cross. The Cross family would very much like to. He doesn't get to finish. Ethan doesn't break his stride. He doesn't even look at Dorian directly. One single, ice-cold word drops from his lips. Leave. Just that. But it carries a cold that seems to reach something primal in Dorian's chest. An instinctive terror closes around his throat, leaving him unable to produce a single sound in response. He stands frozen, watching helplessly as the two of them walk straight past him without a second glance. Only when their figures disappear around the corner does the suffocating pressure lift entirely. Dorian's legs give out beneath him, and he sinks to the ground. The trembling relief of someone who has narrowly escaped something they could not name fills his entire body. But when he looks up and meets the complicated stares from those around him, his fists clench tight. He, the young lord of the Cross family, when has he ever been made to collapse in public? I swear it here and now. One day I will make you both pay for this. The words land in the empty air, with no one to hear them, but people who are already afraid of the two who just walked away. After leaving the dungeon district, Lyra and Ethan walk along a quiet street. The day's events are still cycling through Lyra's mind in an endless loop. A clearing of a 6-star dungeon, the god of war, the enforcement squad. Her emotions are on a roller coaster that has not yet found its breaking point. But just as the air around them begins to feel almost peaceful, something in the space ahead tears open. A dark violet rift, narrow and crackling, splitting the air with a sound like static. And from it, an aura completely alien to this world floods outward in a wave. A humanoid lizard creature steps through, its eyes locking onto the two of them immediately. A void creature. Lyra's face drains of color in an instant. She steps behind Ethan on pure instinct. The void creature's aura registers at a full level 30, an extremely serious threat for any average awakened person. Ethan's reaction is the opposite of what the situation calls for. He doesn't shift his stance, doesn't reach for a counter ability, doesn't even tense. He simply waits. And the moment the creature lunges, he raises one hand and snaps his fingers into the air. The level 30 void creature freezes solid midair. Then its massive body visibly shrivels and erodes before collapsing entirely into dust. Temporal rewrite. Target existence accelerated to 10,000 years. The experience surge that follows is staggering, far greater than the Bone Sovereign had given. In a single instant, the level rockets from 40 all the way to 47. Even Ethan feels a genuine flicker of surprise at the readout. Why is this experience gained so extreme? Lyra explains, the words coming quickly as the implications stack up in her own mind. Void creatures are pure concentrations of chaos and destructive energy at their core, she says. The experience from killing them far surpasses anything from native monsters or dungeon creatures. They can also carry rare materials from other dimensions, which is why, even knowing how dangerous they are, nations and major factions still organize controlled hunts. A blazing light ignites in Ethan's eyes. These void creatures are basically walking experience packages, so where can we find more of them? Lyra blinks. If void creatures could just appear anywhere inside a human city, we'd all be dead already. She explains the mechanics carefully. They only appear at fixed spatial rift outbreak zones, or in areas heavily contaminated by energy from other dimensions. Cities maintain powerful barrier formations and protective forces for exactly this reason. Under normal circumstances, a void creature appearing on a quiet street inside a protected city is simply not possible. The words cut off, and her expression changes with them. Ethan catches it immediately. He turns to face the spot where the rift had opened, his voice dropping into something low and precise. So why did a level 30 void creature just appear out of nowhere on a street inside the city, and right in front of us, no less? The question hangs in the air, and the only answer that fits is the one neither of them wants to confirm. This void creature was being kept by someone here inside the city, and it got loose, or it was released deliberately. The cracked, worn clock face that was dismissed as worthless this morning has leveled to 4 to 7 in a single day. A being who has crumbled bonehounds, erased an enforcement captain, stood unmoved before the god of war's scrutiny, and answered a nation's invitation with the words, "We'll think about it," and someone already knows enough about them to want them gone. That is not a coincidence. That is a message. Ethan looks down at the ash where the void creature had been and says nothing for a long moment. Lyra watches him, the calm on his face more unsettling than fear would have been, because this kind of calm is not the absence of a reaction. It is the presence of someone who has already decided what comes next. Somewhere in the city, whoever sent that creature is waiting for confirmation that the job is done. They are going to be waiting a long time. Ethan begins walking again, unhurried, his footsteps steady on the quiet street. Lyra falls into step beside him automatically, and for a moment neither of them speaks. The events of a single day have already redrawn every map Lyra thought she had of this world. A girl with no abilities and a discarded, cracked clock face have cleared a dungeon that mutated to 6 stars, have been invited by the god of war himself to a war that shapes nations, have been targeted by something deliberate and invisible, moving through the city's defenses with resources most people don't have access to. And through all of it, the being walking beside her has remained exactly as unmoved as he was the moment she first picked him up off the floor. She glances at him sideways. There is a thought forming that she doesn't say out loud yet. The first person who looked at the Dusk Sovereign and saw something worth discarding was Celine Mist. The first person who looked at him and saw something worth keeping was Lyra Bell. That difference, small as it seemed in the moment, is now the line between the very different futures. Celine is already beginning to understand what she threw away. Dorian Cross is already on the ground nursing a bruised pride and making promises he may not be equipped to keep. Lance Croft and his squad are ash. Garrett Hale is crimson mist. And somewhere in the city, someone sent a void creature onto a quiet street toward the people they underestimated. That someone has not yet made themselves known. But when you are walking beside the Sovereign of Time, the question of when something happens is never really out of his hands. The city hums quietly around them as the last of the crimson sky from that morning fades into an ordinary dusk. Only the faint lingering set of ash on the air marks the fact that this street is not as ordinary as it looks. Ethan pauses, just briefly, and looks up at the sky with an expression Lyra cannot quite read. Then he lowers his gaze, and something close to satisfaction settles across his features. Not the satisfaction of someone who has finished something, the satisfaction of someone who has only just started. "We keep moving," he says. Lyra nods and matches his stride without being asked. She has stopped trying to figure out which of them is the contracted creature, and which is the contractor. That distinction stopped mattering somewhere between the crumbling slimes and the ghost of an enforcement captain fading in the air. What she knows now is simpler and larger. They are one unit, moving toward a peak that neither of them can fully see yet, and every person or force that stands in the way of that is going to find out the same thing that Celine found out in the Grand Hall. Being discarded and being worthless are the very different things. Back at the City Lord's mansion, Cain Voss is still standing at his window when Zephyr Thane returns to report the news about the void creature on the street. The old man listens without turning around. "Someone move quickly," he says finally, his voice as even as if commenting on the weather. "Should we investigate?" Zephyr asks. Cain Voss is quiet for a moment. Then he speaks again. And the certainty in his voice is the kind that comes from watching a great number of people in a great many situations over a very long life. Don't bother. Whoever sent it already received their answer, and it was not the answer they were hoping for. He turns from the window at last, and the expression on his face is not concern. It is quiet, deliberate patience. Prepare the absol corridor access, and make sure no one interferes with what's coming. Zephyr Thane does not ask for clarification. He simply bows and leaves the room, and Cain Voss turns back to the window, gazing out at the same ordinary dusk settling over the city, thinking about a cracked clock face that cracked the sky open, thinking about a girl with no abilities who crouched down and picked it up anyway, and thinking about the kind of future that starts when the right to people find each other at exactly the right moment. Out on that quiet street, Ethan and Lyra keep walking. The awakening trial is still ahead. The Absol corridor is still ahead. The fate war and the weight of a nation's expectations still ahead. And somewhere behind all of that, whoever sent the void creature is still ahead too. None of it feels threatening from where they stand right now. Not because those things are small, but because the being walking on this street with his hands in his pockets can rewrite the timeline of any living creature he chooses, can freeze a dragon's claw in midair with a raised arm, can dissolve an enforcement captain with nothing more than the names of his techniques, spoken quietly, can answer the god of war with 2 calm words and walk out the door. And he chose, out of everyone in that hall, out of the imperial aptitude and the resources and the knowledge on offer, to extend his hand to a girl who had nothing, who saw a broken clock on the floor and thought it deserved to be held carefully. The Dusk Sovereign did not become the sovereign of time by accident. He became it because time, of all things, understands which moments matter. And that moment, when Lyra Bell said she doesn't want you, but I do, was the moment everything began. Not the golden light, not the triple S rank, not the phantom clocks or the 20 nights or the arc that split the sky. All of that came after. It started with a girl crouching down on a hall floor, holding something broken like it was precious. And the sovereign who felt that and decided she was worth every peak this world has to offer. The city moves on around them, unaware of what is walking through its streets. But it won't stay unaware for long. The Dusk Sovereign has arrived in this world. He has chosen his partner, and time, as always, will tell the rest.